The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Belmont Luxury Boutique as 17-year-old Damon stepped through the heavy glass doors. The store smelled like expensive leather and fresh flowers, with soft classical music playing in the background. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and every surface seemed to sparkle under the warm lighting. Damon wore his usual after-school outfit, worn sneakers, faded jeans with a small hole in the knee, and a simple hoodie from his high school. His backpack hung loosely over one shoulder, stuffed with textbooks and homework he'd finished later that night. To anyone watching, he looked like any other teenager heading home from school. But Damon wasn't here by accident. For the past 6 months, he'd been working weekends at a local grocery store, carefully saving every dollar he earned. His mother's 40th birthday was coming up next week, and he wanted to give her something special. Something that would show her how much he appreciated everything she'd done for him. The store was quiet except for a few well-dressed customers, browsing through racks of designer clothes and shelves lined with luxury handbags. Damon walked slowly through the aisles, taking in the prices on the small tags. Most items cost more than he made in 2 months, but he'd done his research online. There was one particular handbag he'd been eyeing for weeks, saving up specifically for it. Behind the main counter, store manager Richard Kane watched Damon's every move. Kane was in his early 40s, always perfectly dressed in expensive suits with his hair slicked back and a permanent look of superiority on his face. He'd been working in luxury retail for over 15 years and prided himself on being able to spot potential customers from a mile away. And right now, everything about this teenager screamed trouble. Kane whispered something to one of his sales associates, a young woman named Lisa, who'd only been working there for a few months. She glanced over at Damon and frowned, clearly uncomfortable with whatever Kane had just told her. Damon continued browsing, unaware of the attention he was attracting. He found the section with women's handbags and began looking for the one he'd seen online. It was a beautiful black leather bag with gold hardware. Elegant but not too flashy. His mother would love it. "Can I help you find something?" The voice behind him was sharp and cold. Damon turned around to see Kane standing there with his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. 2 other employees had positioned themselves nearby, pretending to organize merchandise but clearly keeping an eye on the situation. "Yes, actually," Damon said politely, giving Kane a friendly smile. "I'm looking for a specific handbag. It's black leather with gold buckles. I saw it on your website." Kane's expression didn't change. "Are you sure you're in the right store? We don't typically carry items that would be in your price range." The comment hit Damon like a slap, but he kept his composure. He'd dealt with assumptions about him before, though rarely so blatantly. "I'm pretty sure this is the right place. The website said it was available at this location. Our handbags start at $1,500, Kane said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the department stores in the mall. They have a nice selection of more affordable options." Damon felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but he stood his ground. "I understand the prices here. I've been saving up for months to buy something special for my mother's birthday." Kane let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Saving up? How much allowance money could you possibly have?" The question was so condescending that Damon had to take a deep breath before responding. Around them, other customers were starting to notice the conversation. An elderly woman in a fur coat paused her shopping to listen. A young couple near the jewelry counter exchanged concerned glances. "I work at Miller's Grocery on weekends," Damon explained calmly. "I've been saving my paychecks." "Right," Kane said, his tone dripping with disbelief. "And I suppose you're going to pay with a stack of crumpled singles?" Lisa, the sales associate, shifted uncomfortably nearby. She'd been watching the interaction with growing unease. The way Kane was treating this polite young man didn't sit right with her, but Kane was her boss and she couldn't afford to lose this job. Damon ignored Kane's sarcasm and pulled out his phone. "The bag I'm looking for is model number LX2847. It's listed at $3,000 on your website. Could you please check if you have it in stock?" Kane's eyebrows shot up at the mention of such an expensive item. $3,000 was a significant sale even for their store. But looking at this teenager in his cheap clothes and worn sneakers, Kane was convinced this was some kind of joke or scam. "Listen, kid," Kane said, his voice getting louder. "I've been in this business for a long time. I can tell when someone is serious about making a purchase and when someone is just wasting my time. You're clearly in the wrong place. I'm not wasting anyone's time, Damon replied, his voice still calm but with a slight edge now. I have the money and I'd like to see the bag, please. Kane crossed his arms tighter and shook his head. I don't think so. These bags are delicate merchandise. We don't just let anyone handle them. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Other customers were now openly staring at the confrontation. Someone near the back of the store had quietly pulled out their phone and appeared to be recording. Damon felt a mixture of anger and humiliation washing over him, but his mother had always taught him to keep his dignity no matter how others treated him. She'd faced her own share of prejudice and discrimination over the years, and she'd always handled it with grace and strength. What exactly do you mean by anyone? Damon asked quietly. Kane's face flushed slightly. He realized he'd said too much, but his pride wouldn't let him back down now. I mean people who clearly can't afford our merchandise. This isn't a museum where you can just come in and look around for free. The store had gone completely quiet now. Even the classical music seemed softer. Every customer and employee was watching to see what would happen next. Damon stood there for a long moment, looking around at all the faces staring at him. He thought about his mother, probably at home right now preparing dinner after a long day at her job as a nurse. He thought about all the extra shifts he'd worked, all the times he'd chosen to save money instead of hanging out with friends. He thought about the look of joy he'd imagined on his mother's face when she opened her birthday present. I see, Damon said finally, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. Well, I guess I'll have to take my business somewhere else. As he turned to leave, Kane called after him with a smug smile. There's a nice discount store about 10 blocks from here. That might be more your speed. Damon stopped at the door and looked back one more time. Kane stood there looking satisfied with himself, completely unaware that this moment would change both of their lives forever. Damon stood frozen at the store entrance, his hand still on the brass door handle. The weight of Kane's final insult settled over him like a heavy blanket. Around him he could feel the eyes of every customer and employee burning into his back. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed uncomfortable, but a few appeared to agree with Kane's assessment. He could have left right then, should have left. But something inside him refused to be dismissed so easily. His mother had taught him to stand up for himself, to never let anyone make him feel less than he was. She'd worked double shifts for years to give him opportunities, and he wasn't going to let some arrogant store manager make him feel ashamed of who he was. Turning back around, Damon walked straight up to Kane with renewed determination. Actually, I'd like to see that bag I mentioned. The LX2847. Kane's satisfied expression quickly turned to irritation. I thought I made myself clear. You need to leave. I'm a customer with money to spend, Damon said firmly. I'm not leaving until I see what I came here to buy. The tension in the store ratcheted up another notch. Lisa, the young sales associate, looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. An older employee named George stepped closer, clearly ready to intervene if Kane gave the word. Kane's face was turning red now. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. You want to see the bag? Fine. But you're not touching it, and when you realize you can't afford it, you're leaving immediately. He motioned for Lisa to follow him to the locked display case where the most expensive handbags were kept. With exaggerated movements, Kane pulled out a set of keys and opened the case. Inside sat the bag Damon had been dreaming about for months. It was even more beautiful in person, the leather so soft it seemed to glow under the store lighting. This, Kane announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, is a $3,000 handbag, handcrafted Italian leather, gold-plated hardware designed by one of Europe's most exclusive fashion houses. Damon studied the bag carefully. It was perfect. His mother would absolutely love it. It's beautiful. I'll take it. Kane let out a bark of laughter that echoed through the store. You'll take it? Just like that? Do you have any idea what $3,000 actually means? I know exactly what it means, Damon replied calmly. It means 3 months of working every weekend. It means skipping movies with friends and bringing lunch from home instead of buying it. It means saving every penny because I wanted to give my mother something special. For just a moment, Kane seemed taken aback by the sincerity in Damon's voice, but his arrogance quickly returned. Even if you somehow managed to scrape together that much money, I'm not convinced it's yours legitimately. The accusation hit the store like a thunderbolt. Several customers gasped audibly. Lisa covered her mouth with her hand, clearly shocked by her manager's words. "Excuse me?" Damon's voice was dangerously quiet. Kane was too far gone to stop now. His prejudice and ego had completely taken over. "I'm saying that kids like you don't just walk around with $3,000 in cash. Where did you really get this money? Kids like me?" Damon repeated, his anger finally starting to show. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "You know exactly what I mean," Kane shot back. "I've seen it before. Young people come in here with suspicious amounts of cash, thinking they can just waltz in and buy whatever they want. Well, not in my store." The elderly woman in the fur coat had heard enough.
"Young man," she called out to Kane, "this is absolutely disgraceful."
This boy has been nothing but polite. Kane spun around to face her. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but I know how to run my store. We have to be careful about who we do business with." "Careful about what exactly?" asked the young man from the couple by the jewelry counter. He'd been recording the interaction on his phone for the past few minutes. "This kid hasn't done anything wrong." Kane noticed the phone and his anger spiked even higher. "Put that away. You can't record in here." "Actually, we can," the young woman next to him said. "This is a public business, and what you're doing is discrimination." Damon reached into his backpack and pulled out a white envelope. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice remained steady. "This is $3,000 in cash. I earned every penny of it working at Miller's Grocery. I can show you my pay stubs if you want proof." Kane stared at the envelope like it might bite him. The money was obviously real, neatly organized in $100 bills. But admitting he was wrong now would mean losing face in front of everyone. "I don't care if the money is real," Kane declared. "I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, and I'm refusing to serve you." The words hung in the air like a slap. Even George, the older employee who'd been supporting Kane, looked uncomfortable now. This had gone way too far. Damon carefully put the money back in his backpack. "So you're telling me that even though I have the exact amount needed to buy this bag, even though I've been saving for months, even though I've been polite and respectful, you won't sell it to me?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Kane said with a cruel smile. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before wasting people's time." "And why won't you sell it to me?" Damon pressed. "Give me one good reason that isn't based on what I look like or how old I am." Kane's silence was answer enough. He couldn't give a legitimate business reason because there wasn't one. Everyone in the store knew it, and the tension was becoming unbearable. Lisa finally found her voice. "Mr. Kane, maybe you should mind your own business," Kane snapped at her. Then he turned back to Damon. "I want you out of my store now." "Your store?" Damon asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you were just the manager." Kane's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "I've been managing this location for 8 years. I know what's best for this business, and what's best is getting rid of troublemakers like you." Damon took a long look around the store, memorizing every detail. The fancy decorations, the expensive merchandise, the uncomfortable faces of the customers who'd witnessed this whole exchange. He looked at Kane with a mixture of pity and determination. "You know what?" Damon said quietly. "You're right. I don't belong in a store like this. Not because I can't afford it, but because I wouldn't want to give my money to people who treat others this way." He walked toward the door again, but this time he paused and turned back one final time. "I hope you remember this moment, Mr. Kane, because I promise you I will never forget it." Kane watched him go with satisfaction, completely unaware that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his career. As the door closed behind Damon, the store erupted in whispered conversations. Several customers left immediately, disgusted by what they'd witnessed. Lisa stood by the handbag display, fighting back tears. She'd just watched her manager destroy a young man's dignity for no reason at all. In 8 hours, she'd be updating her resume. George shook his head and walked away, wondering how he'd worked alongside Kane for so long without seeing what kind of person he really was. And Kane? Kane straightened his tie and went back to his office, convinced he'd handled the situation perfectly. He had no idea that in less than 24 hours, his entire world would come crashing down around him. The ride home felt longer than usual for Damon. He sat in the back seat of the city bus, staring out the window as familiar neighborhoods rolled past. The envelope containing his hard-earned money felt heavy in his backpack, but not nearly as heavy as the weight in his chest. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. Kane's dismissive laugh. The way other customers had stared. The humiliation of being treated like a criminal, simply for wanting to buy his mother a birthday gift. Most of all, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't really about him at all. It was about something much bigger and more painful. By the time Damon reached his stop, the sun was beginning to set. He walked the 3 blocks to his house slowly, trying to figure out how to tell his mother what had happened. She'd be furious, of course, but she'd also be hurt. She'd faced similar treatment throughout her life, and he knew it would break her heart to learn that her son was now experiencing the same thing. The house was a modest 2-story building in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Damon could smell dinner cooking as he approached the front door, and he could hear music playing softly from the kitchen radio. "Damon, is that you?" his mother called out as he entered. "Yeah, Mom, it's me." Angela Williams appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She was a beautiful woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile that could light up any room. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital, often pulling double shifts to make ends meet and save for Damon's college fund. "You're later than usual," she said, giving him a quick hug. "Everything okay at school?" Damon hesitated. His mother had enough stress in her life without him adding to it. But she'd always taught him to be honest, and he'd never been good at hiding things from her anyway. "Actually, I didn't come straight home from school. I went to that store I told you about. The one with the handbag." Angela's face lit up with excitement. "Oh, honey, you didn't have to do that. I told you not to spend your savings on me." "I wanted to," Damon said softly. "But there was a problem." Something in his tone made Angela's smile fade. She led him into the living room and sat down on the couch beside him. "What kind of problem?" Damon took a deep breath and told her everything. He described Kane's attitude from the moment he walked in. The condescending comments about his appearance and age, the assumption that he couldn't afford anything in the store, the suggestion that his money might not be legitimate. As he spoke, he watched his mother's expression change from concern to anger to something that looked like deep, familiar pain. She'd heard stories like this before because she'd lived them herself. "Oh, sweetheart," she said when he finished, pulling him into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry that happened to you. The worst part is that I had the money," Damon said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I had exactly what I needed, and it didn't matter." Angela held him for a long moment, thinking about all the times she'd faced similar situations. The job interviews where she was clearly qualified, but somehow not quite what they were looking for. The stores where sales associates followed her around. The assumptions people made about her as a single mother. She'd hoped things would be different for her son, that maybe his generation wouldn't have to deal with the same prejudices she'd faced. But here they were, having the same conversation her own mother had with her 20 years ago. "You know what?" Angela said, pulling back to look at her son. "Maybe it's time I tell you something I should have told you a long time ago." Damon looked at her curiously. There was something in her voice he'd never heard before, a mixture of pride and secrecy. "Your father and we never told you much about his family, about where he came from or what he did before he met me." This was true. Damon knew very little about his father's background. David Williams had died in a car accident when Damon was only 3 years old. Angela rarely talked about him, and when she did, it was always about their love story or what kind of man he was, never about his work or family. "Dad was poor like us, right?" Damon asked. "That's why you always had to work so hard after he died?" Angela smiled sadly. "Oh, honey, your father was many things, but poor wasn't one of them." She walked over to an old wooden chest in the corner of the room and pulled out a small box Damon had seen before but never been allowed to open. Inside were photographs, letters, and documents she'd kept hidden for years. "Your father," she said, sitting back down and showing him a newspaper clipping, "was David Williams, as in Williams Tech Corporation, Williams Real Estate Holdings, Williams Foundation for Education." Damon stared at the newspaper article in disbelief. The headline read, "Local tech mogul dies in tragic accident." Below it was a photo of a man who looked exactly like Damon would look in 20 years. But we live in a regular house. You work as a nurse. We shop at discount stores. I work at a grocery store to save money. How is this possible?" Angela laughed softly, though there were tears in her eyes. "Because that's what your father wanted. He grew up poor, worked his way up from nothing. He was terrified that if you grew up with money, you'd never learn the value of hard work or understand what life is really like for most people. She showed him more papers, bank statements with numbers that made Damon's head spin, trust fund documents, investment portfolios, legal papers establishing foundations and charities. He left specific instructions, Angela continued. You were to grow up normally, earn your own money, learn the value of $1. On your 18th birthday, you'd learn the truth and decide what to do with the inheritance. Damon felt like the world was spinning around him. Everything he thought he knew about his life was wrong. So we're rich? You're rich, Angela corrected. I chose to keep living this way because I wanted to honor your father's wishes. I wanted you to become the kind of man he was, someone who understood struggle and appreciated what he had. Does this mean I could have just bought that handbag without working all those weekends? Angela smiled and shook her head. No, baby. It means you're exactly the kind of person your father hoped you'd become. Someone who works hard for what he wants, who treats people with respect, who doesn't think money makes him better than anyone else. Damon looked at the newspaper clipping again, studying his father's face. What kind of businesses did he own? All kinds. Tech companies, real estate, retail stores. He always said the most important thing wasn't how much money you made, but how you treated people along the way. Retail stores? Damon asked, a thought beginning to form in his mind. Angela nodded. Dozens of them. High-end boutiques, department stores, shopping centers. He believed that every customer deserved respect, regardless of how they looked or how much money they appeared to have. Damon was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd learned. Then slowly a smile began to spread across his face. Mom, he said, I think it's time I learned a little more about the family business. Angela looked at her son's expression and felt a mixture of pride and concern. She recognized that look. It was the same expression David used to get when someone had treated him unfairly, and he was planning to do something about it. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking, Damon said, that Mr. Kane at Belmont Luxury Boutique is about to learn a very important lesson about judging people by their appearance. That night, as Damon lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about the conversation in a completely new light. Kane hadn't just insulted some random teenager. He'd insulted the son of one of the most successful businessmen in the city. More importantly, he'd revealed exactly the kind of person he really was. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. That evening, while Damon was processing the revelation about his father's legacy, something interesting was happening across town. In a sleek downtown office building, attorney Jennifer Walsh was working late when her phone rang. Jennifer, it's Angela Williams. I hope I'm not calling too late. Jennifer had been David Williams's personal attorney and close friend for over 15 years. She'd helped him write his will and had been checking in on Angela and Damon regularly since David's death, though always from a distance as per his instructions. Angela, it's never too late for you. How's Damon doing? That's actually why I'm calling. I think it might be time. Jennifer sat up straighter in her chair. She'd been waiting for this call for 14 years. Time for what exactly? Angela told her about the incident at Belmont Luxury Boutique, watching through her living room window as Damon researched the store on his laptop. He deserves to know everything now, and frankly, I think David would want him to handle this situation. I'll pull the files tonight, Jennifer said. All of them, including the ones about retail holdings. Retail holdings? Oh, Angela, Jennifer said with a knowing smile in her voice. You're going to find this very interesting. While they talked, Damon was doing his own research. He'd found articles about his father online, interviews about his business philosophy, and mission statements from his various companies. One quote kept standing out. A business that doesn't treat all customers with dignity and respect doesn't deserve to exist. The next morning, Jennifer arrived at the Williams house with 3 large boxes of documents and a team of financial advisors. Angela had taken the day off work, knowing this would be a life-changing conversation for her son. Good morning, Damon, Jennifer said warmly. I'm Jennifer Walsh. I was your father's attorney and friend. Damon shook her hand, still trying to process everything that was happening. Nice to meet you. Your mother tells me you had an unfortunate experience yesterday at a store called Belmont Luxury Boutique. That's one way to put it, Damon said dryly. Jennifer opened the first box and pulled out a thick folder. Before we discuss that, let me show you exactly what your father left you. For the next 2 hours, Jennifer walked Damon through his inheritance. The numbers were staggering. His father had built a business empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Tech companies that developed software used by major corporations, real estate holdings that included office buildings, shopping centers, and residential complexes throughout the city. And then there are the retail investments, Jennifer said, opening the second box. She spread out documents showing David Williams's ownership stakes in dozens of stores and shopping centers. Department stores, boutiques, restaurants, and specialty shops. He'd believed strongly in supporting local businesses while ensuring they maintained high standards of customer service. Your father had a particular interest in luxury retail, Jennifer explained. He felt that high-end stores had a responsibility to treat all customers well, not just the obviously wealthy ones. Damon studied the documents carefully. Do any of these stores still exist? Most of them. Your father's business partners have been managing them according to his guidelines, but Jennifer paused and pulled out a specific file. There's one situation that's been developing recently. She handed him a folder marked Belmont Luxury Boutique, Acquisition Opportunity. Damon's eyes widened as he read. He was planning to buy Belmont? Not exactly. The store has been struggling financially for the past 2 years. Poor management, declining customer satisfaction, several discrimination complaints that were never properly addressed. The current owners approached us last month about a potential buyout. Angela leaned forward. So David's company could buy the store? David's company? Jennifer smiled. Angela, Damon is the company now. These are his decisions to make. The weight of that statement settled over the room. Damon looked at the financial reports for Belmont Luxury Boutique. The store was losing money, had high employee turnover, and customer reviews were consistently negative. Many complaints mentioned rude staff and poor treatment of young customers or people who didn't look wealthy enough. The current owners are asking for $2 million, Jennifer continued. Based on the store's location and potential, it's actually a good deal. But your father's team has been hesitant because of the management issues. What kind of management issues? Damon asked, though he suspected he already knew. Jennifer pulled out another file. Multiple complaints about discriminatory practices. Customers being followed around the store, being told they couldn't afford merchandise, being refused service for no legitimate reason. The manager, a man named Richard Kane, has been the subject of at least a dozen formal complaints in the past 3 years. Damon felt his anger rising again, but this time it was different. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was about something bigger. What would happen if we bought the store? He asked. We'd have complete control. We could change management, retrain staff, implement new policies. Your father's retail properties are known for excellent customer service and inclusive practices. Angela watched her son's face carefully. She could see him thinking, processing not just the business opportunity, but the chance to prevent other people from experiencing what he'd gone through. There's something else, Jennifer said. I've been making some calls this morning. It seems several customers recorded parts of your interaction with Kane yesterday. The videos are starting to spread on social media. She showed them her phone. The video from the young couple at the jewelry counter had been posted online with the caption, "Luxury store manager refuses to serve polite teenager with cash in hand." It already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most of them expressing outrage at Kane's behavior. This is going viral, Jennifer continued. Local news stations are picking it up. The store's reputation is going to take a serious hit. Damon studied the videos, watching himself be humiliated all over again. But this time he also saw something else. He saw other customers' reactions. He saw Lisa, the young sales associate, looking uncomfortable and ashamed. He saw how Kane's behavior affected everyone in the store, not just him. The current owners are probably panicking right now, Jennifer said. Bad pub. Publicity like this could destroy their business completely. They might be willing to accept a much lower offer. How much lower? Damon asked. Maybe half. 1 million instead of 2. Damon was quiet for a long time, thinking about everything he'd learned in the past 24 hours. His father's legacy, his own inheritance, the power he now had to make real changes in the world. I want to buy the store, he said finally. Damon, Angela said gently. Are you sure? This is a big decision, I'm sure. But I don't just want to buy it and fire Kane. I want to do this right. I want to honor Dad's vision of what a business should be. Jennifer smiled. What did you have in mind? I want to buy the store, yes. But I also want to transform it into something better, a place that really does treat every customer with respect. I want to create jobs for people who understand what good service means. And I want to make sure Kane learns from this experience, not just gets punished for it. That's very mature of you, Jennifer said. Clearly impressed? My dad built his fortune by treating people well, Damon said. I want to do the same thing. But first, I think Mr. Kane and I need to have another conversation. Angela and Jennifer exchanged glances. They both recognized the determination in Damon's voice. David Williams had sounded exactly the same way when he was planning something big. When do we start? Damon asked. Jennifer was already reaching for her phone. How about right now? I think the current owners of Belmont Luxury Boutique are about to receive a very interesting offer. As Jennifer began making calls, Damon looked out the window at the city his father had helped build. Tomorrow he would walk back into that store, but this time everything would be different. This time he wouldn't just be a teenager with money to spend. This time he would be the owner. The next morning arrived with unseasonably warm sunshine, but Richard Kane was too distracted to notice. He'd spent most of the night fielding angry phone calls from the store's owners after the videos of his confrontation with Damon had gone viral. Local news stations were calling for interviews. The store's social media accounts were flooded with negative comments. His job was hanging by a thread. Kane arrived at Belmont Luxury Boutique an hour early, hoping to prepare some kind of damage control strategy. But as he unlocked the front door, he noticed something odd. There was already someone waiting outside, leaning casually against the building. It was Damon. But something was different about him today. Instead of his usual school clothes, he wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, and polished dress shoes. He looked older, more confident, and there was something in his expression that made Kane's stomach clench with unease. We're not open yet, Kane called out, trying to keep his voice steady. That's okay, Damon replied calmly. I'm not here to shop. I'm here to talk. Kane hesitated at the door. Part of him wanted to refuse entry, but the events of the past 24 hours had taught him that this teenager was more trouble than he appeared. The last thing he needed was another confrontation caught on camera. 5 minutes, Kane said grudgingly, unlocking the door. Damon stepped inside and looked around the store with new eyes. He noticed things he'd missed yesterday. The way the lighting highlighted the merchandise. The strategic placement of the most expensive items. The subtle details that made customers feel either welcome or intimidated. Nice place, Damon said conversationally. How long have you been the manager here? 8 years, Kane replied warily. Look, if you're here to cause more trouble, I'm not here to cause trouble, Damon interrupted. I'm here to offer you an opportunity. Kane frowned. What kind of opportunity? Instead of answering immediately, Damon walked over to the handbag display where everything had started yesterday. The black leather bag he'd wanted to buy for his mother sat exactly where it had been. Still beautiful. Still $3,000. You know what's interesting about this bag? Damon said. Yesterday you wouldn't let me buy it because you assumed I couldn't afford it. You made that assumption based on how I looked, how old I am, and probably some other factors you wouldn't want to say out loud. Kane's face was turning red again. Now listen here. But here's the thing, Damon continued, his voice remaining calm and measured. You were wrong about me. Completely wrong. And that mistake is about to cost you everything. Before Kane could respond, the store's front door opened again. Jennifer Walsh entered, followed by 2 other people in expensive suits carrying briefcases and official-looking documents. Good morning, Mr. Kane, Jennifer said pleasantly. I'm Jennifer Walsh, attorney for Williams Holdings Corporation. I believe you know my client. Kane looked between Jennifer and Damon in confusion. Your client? Allow me to introduce Damon Williams, Jennifer said formally. Majority owner of Williams Holdings Corporation and, as of 1 hour ago, the new owner of Belmont Luxury Boutique. The words hit Kane like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his face going pale. That's impossible. The Hendersons own this store. The Hendersons owned this store, one of the other attorneys corrected. They accepted our offer early this morning. All sales are final as of 8 a.m. Jennifer handed Kane a thick legal document. These are the new ownership papers. Everything is completely legal and properly filed with the city. Kane's hands shook as he tried to read the papers, but the words seemed to blur together. This couldn't be happening. Some random teenager couldn't just buy the store where he'd worked for 8 years. You're probably wondering how this is possible, Damon said, sitting down in one of the store's elegant chairs. Let me explain. My father was David Williams. You might have heard of him. Kane's face went completely white. Everyone in the business community knew about David Williams. The tech mogul who'd built an empire from nothing. The philanthropist who donated millions to local charities. The businessman who died tragically young, leaving behind a fortune that had been managed by trustees for years. Yesterday, when you assumed I was just some poor kid trying to waste your time, you were talking to the heir of a $300 million business empire, Damon continued. You refused to sell me a handbag that cost less than what I spend on lunch money. Kane sank into a chair, the full weight of his mistake finally hitting him. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, Damon said. That was the whole point. My father wanted me to grow up understanding what it was like to be treated based on who I really am, not how much money my family has. And you taught me a very valuable lesson about how some people in business really think. Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out another set of documents. Mr. Kane, you have two options. Option 1. You're fired immediately. We'll provide references for your 8 years of service, and you can try to find another job despite the negative publicity from yesterday's incident. Kane looked up hopefully. That didn't sound too bad considering the circumstances. Option 2, Damon said, is more interesting. You stay on as manager but under some very specific conditions. Kane frowned. What kind of conditions? Damon stood up and walked over to the handbag display again. First, you're going to personally apologize to every customer you've ever treated the way you treated me. We have a list. He gestured to one of the attorneys who handed Kane a folder containing customer complaint forms dating back several years. Second, you're going to undergo extensive training on customer service, diversity, and inclusion every week for the next 6 months. Kane's face was burning with humiliation, but he kept listening. Third, your salary is going to be cut by 50% for the next year. The money you lose will go into a fund that provides scholarships for underprivileged kids who want to work in retail. And fourth, Damon said, his voice becoming more serious, you're going to help me transform this store into a place that treats every single customer with dignity and respect, regardless of their age, race, gender, or how much money they appear to have. Kane sat in stunned silence for a long moment. The offer was humiliating, but it was also more generous than he deserved. Most people in Damon's position would have simply fired him and moved on. Why? Kane asked quietly. Why give me a second chance after what I did? Damon considered the question carefully. Because my father always believed that people could change if they were given the right motivation and support. You made a terrible mistake yesterday, but that doesn't mean you can't learn from it and become better. He picked up the black leather handbag and examined it closely. Besides, I'm going to need experienced people to help me run this place. The question is whether you're willing to do the work to become the kind of person this store needs. Kane looked around the store that had been his domain for 8 years. He thought about his mortgage, his bills, the difficulty of finding another job after yesterday's viral videos. But more than that, he thought about the look in Damon's eyes when he'd refused to sell him the handbag. The quiet dignity the teenager had maintained even while being humiliated. I'll do it, Kane said finally. I'll do whatever it takes. Damon nodded and walked over to the cash register. Good. Then let's start with this. He pulled out the same white envelope he'd brought yesterday containing $3,000 in carefully saved money. I'd like to buy this handbag for my mother's birthday. And this time, I expect to receive the kind of customer service that every person who walks through that door deserves. Kane stood up slowly and walked over to the display case. His hands were still shaking slightly as he carefully removed the handbag and placed it on the counter. This is our finest Italian leather handbag, he said, his voice formal but respectful, handcrafted with gold-plated hardware. It comes with a lifetime warranty and complimentary gift wrapping. That sounds perfect, Damon said, counting out the money. My mother is going to love it. As Kane carefully wrapped the handbag in elegant paper and ribbon, Jennifer began explaining the new policies that would take effect immediately. Diversity training for all staff, customer service standards that applied to everyone equally, regular reviews to ensure the store lived up to its new mission. There's one more thing, Damon said as Kane finished wrapping the gift. I want you to personally train every new employee who works here. I want you to tell them about yesterday, about the mistake you made, and about why it's important to treat every customer with respect. Kane nodded, understanding that this would be part of his redemption. I will. I promise. Over the following months, Belmont Luxury Boutique became known throughout the city as a store that truly welcomed everyone. Kane proved to be an effective teacher, sharing his story with new employees and making sure they understood the importance of looking beyond appearances. Lisa, the young sales associate who'd been so uncomfortable during the original incident, was promoted to assistant manager. She helped implement new policies and became known for her exceptional customer service. The store's profits increased dramatically as word spread about the welcoming atmosphere. Customers who had previously felt intimidated by luxury retail found themselves comfortable shopping there. And Damon? He split his time between finishing high school and learning to manage his father's business empire. He kept working weekends at the grocery store until graduation, even though he no longer needed the money. Some lessons he'd learned were worth more than wealth. On his mother's birthday, when Angela opened the beautifully wrapped handbag, she cried tears of joy. Not because of the gift itself, but because of the young man her son had become and the positive changes he was already making in the world. Your father would be so proud, she told him. Damon smiled, thinking about the store that was now thriving under new management, the employees who were learning to see every customer as valuable, and the teenager who might walk in tomorrow wearing worn sneakers and carrying carefully saved money. That teenager would be welcomed with open arms, and that made all the difference.